Welcome to episode number 42 of the American Regularis Podcast. I am your host, JD Walter, and if you would, do me a favor, like and subscribe, tell all your friends, follow me on whatever podcast app you're using, follow me on YouTube, like and tell your friends. Follow me on Twitter at reg_American1 or email me at AmericanRegularspodcast@gmail.com. Hope you guys had a good New Year's. I did. Got a little bit of an extended New Year's break as the snow was just burying people where I'm at out here in the Midwest, and allowed me to look a little bit, spend more time looking up articles and everything. One thing I noticed right out of the gates of the new year was Elon Musk on the warpath, I would say, towards the British government, in particular those currently in power like Keir Starmer. And what he is angry about is something that's been going on for quite a while. And I'm not sure if there was brand new stuff or Elon Musk just heard about it, or finally he just said, let's start off the year right with addressing a serious problem. And that is, he's going after the British government on their failure to address a very dark, serious problem in the UK, which is what's known as groomer gangs. And to be blunt about it, there is a problem with generally Pakistani and Bangladeshi immigrants, or maybe even born in Britain but derived from Pakistani and Bangladeshi ethnicity, with, well, they say grooming, but what it is sexual assault and rape of girls, and young girls at that. I mean, when I say girls, I don't mean it colloquially as calling when you call a woman a girl. I mean, I'm talking about girls oftentimes. And it's horrible. And if this is the first year hearing about it, that's one of the things Elon Musk is mad about, because this thing has kind of been swept under the rug for a long time because of the optics, or because the left, and by the way, the right's been bad at it too, in what you would call the right in the UK. They've been bad at addressing it for fear of being looked at as racist or something of that nature. So on January 1st, Elon starts just this onslaught on Twitter, and he attacks them, and he attacks Keir Starmer, and he attacks Keir Starmer's safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips, who has campaigned against domestic violence for a lot of her career. And he called her a genocidal rape apologist, which she took umbrage with, which most people would, whether it's, no one's going to say, yeah, I accept that title. And, there's tweet after tweet of her calling other people this. So this is something that she should be, the damage and pain and assaults of these young girls, this is something that she should be spearheading against. And her and Starmer and Boris Johnson before them, I mean, going back to all of their prime ministers, no one's done a good job addressing all the damage that's being done to these young girls. And when Keir Starmer, so Musk has posted about this, he posted transcripts of the the atrocities that have been done by these people, by these generally Muslim men to these young girls, and it's horrible. And he posts it, and they say, more or less, Starmer and them say that he, is sensationalizing it, and immediately attaches him to Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is in jail currently. He is way too outspoken for the British government. He's been in jail several times, and I think at one point he was a bit of a hooligan and didn't mind getting into some fisticuffs over stuff, and he's been kind of an agitator, you could say. But they make him out to be whatever, their modern Hitler, when more or less he's a guy who has a problem with the Islamization of Britain, and one of those key things being what's happening to these girls over there. Now, instead of addressing the grievances and issues that Elon Musk has brought up in his tweets, and you should go look at them. There's a lot to learn about there. They just do the two things that progressives do. One, they tie him to someone. They don't really say how. And I don't even think Musk has talked much about Robinson. But they go, oh, look, he's on the side of this guy. So he's with the bad team. And then secondly, it's about race. And they're going to call him a racist. And, misinformation and malinformation without ever saying what it is that he said was wrong. Of course, Keir Starmer's a lawyer. And before he was a prime minister, he was in charge of the director of public prosecutions. But he didn't really do anything during all of this. More or less, and this isn't uniquely a British problem. These problems have been seen in Norway and Sweden and lots of places in Europe where there's this large en masse immigration of Muslims. And basically, these governments keep turning a blind eye towards children, girls as young as 12, being harmed in the name of promoting multiculturalism. The majority in the UK of the victims have been white or Sikh, while the criminals are generally from Pakistan or of Pakistan descent or Bangladesh or Bangladeshi descent. A lot of this information I got was from an article by the Free Press, and it talks about people basically ignoring what's been going on to maintain community relations. Musk tweeted about an instance where the parents went to a house where their child was being harmed and got arrested as they were trying to rescue them. They got arrested by the government. And this Free Press article talks about a place called Telford in 2016. 10 members of the Labour Council wrote to the Home Secretary, the Conservatives, Amber Rudd, claiming the allegations of all these abuses were sensationalized. I'm reading directly from the Free Press article here. I recommend you check it out. And that there was no need for action. 2 years later, there was an investigation by a newspaper called the Sunday Mirror, which counted some 1,000 victims. So 1,000 victims of these grooming gangs. This council talks about how it's being sensationalized. How many victims does it take before it's not sensational? And not sensational in a good way, obviously, but I mean literally, as in something that has to be addressed and looked at and seen to be a huge thing. But no, they say those that are spreading lies and misinformation are far and wide as possible, and they're not interested in the victims, they're interested in themselves. I believe that's what Keir Starmer said about Elon Musk. They immediately say, oh, he's not doing this for them. He's not worried about them. It's just for himself. Okay, whether he is or isn't, let's say Musk has the most selfish and greedy and immoral objectives ever, reasonings for bringing this up. Does that make it not true? Of course it doesn't. They immediately deflect and they say he's with the bad guy and he's bringing this up for the wrong reasons. But Starmer and Phillips, they don't head on address it because the left, whether it's the American left, these progressives in general, or the British left, which I can only assume is worse, they hate to address ugly truths. And that's one of these key notes I've noticed about progressivism. If you ask them, they'll say they want to talk about it, but it'll all be vagaries, and they go more along the lines of, well, it's very nuanced, and there's underlying circumstances, or these things that are happening because of something they want to talk about, such as societal inequities among this population. And that's what we got to address, because that's our talking platform, is that not everybody's equal, and there's not enough equity in the world. And so let's divert from this ugly truth that these specified groups are, as a number, or exceedingly overrepresented in these horrible crimes. And we can't really mention that. We can't really talk about that because we're progressives. And it's an ugly thing that we just don't want to confront hard truths. And so what we'll do as progressives is we will shift it and just say, look, okay, we understand that this is a problem, but instead of talking about that problem, we're going to say, well, what's the underlying thing? So we can get back to talking about how we should pay them more, or how the British people themselves are racist and that's causing it, and this is self-flagellation thing. And then look, and then we're on the side of the angels, or the right side of history, as the progressives always look at it. Now, look, we are addressing ourselves. They can't actually say, this is a problem, this has to stop. And as a result of that cowardice to recognize a hard truth, these girls are going to continue to be exploited and abused and traumatized and damaged. Now, this subject's very upsetting. I mean, it's sickening. The reason I wanted to talk about it, though, was actually coming from a place of optimism, because this is happening, and it's been happening for decades, and it's only getting worse. But at least now you have the richest man in the world with the biggest social media voice in the world bringing it to the forefront and saying, we're not, I don't know, maybe this will be kind of a flight of fancy thing where he gives up on it in a week. But at least for right now, hopefully it's not the flavor of the week, but they're saying this is something that has to be addressed. This is something that has to be corrected. And if there's enough pressure and there's enough force, political force on the British government to correct it, maybe that not only helps the girls there, but maybe it becomes an impetus for the places that aren't safe in Norway, that aren't safe here or there. And, the establishments hate social media for this reason. If you parallel it to when I talked about the the apartment complexes that were being taken over in Colorado by Trendy Aragua, social media brought it to light, and they tried to deny it and tried to hide it under, and eventually, yes, they had to address it and say, oh, it is a real problem. They didn't want to talk about it. Social media has to bring this stuff out into the light, no matter how much they try to hide it. That's the most beautiful thing about social media. And as this happens, as this guerrilla media, and it's not even guerrilla media, it's like the citizens of the world, the everydayers, and then the billionaires like Musk, and then the great journalists like Glenn Greenwald. It's this coalition of oddfellows that are really putting the establishment's feet to the fire and saying, we're tired of you lying about COVID. We're tired of you lying about the wars. We're tired of you lying about our daughters that are being harmed. And if you don't address it, like we're going to make it. We're going to make you address it. And as that happens, I don't necessarily think it'll convert everyone to libertarianism. That'd be nice. But it's going to convert people away from the current style of authoritarianism that is used by the government. Now, it could be a different type of authoritarianism. I think we've seen that already. But the neoliberal world order is going to be continually checked and accosted or castigated when it is caught lying and ignoring these hard truths that it's for so long done so much to not address. And so I hope Elon Musk, and I hope everyone on Twitter and every journalist with a moral compass keeps the pressure up on this, because this is an ugly aspect of the world right now that has to be addressed, and it can't be pushed under the rug any further. So good job, Elon Musk, and I hope that coalition just keeps going and keeps the noise about this ugliness I hope they just keep that noise at 11 and make Starmer and the British government do something about it. Now, the second thing I want to discuss is closer to home. It is about America and or the United States of America, and more specifically, what the United States of America may be. Recently, in the past week or so, Donald Trump has been focused, I would say, on the acquisition of different pieces of land and the incorporation of that land into the United States. He has mentioned in particular, mostly Greenland, which is owned by Denmark currently, but he has also brought about talk about the Panama Canal with a lot of frequency. He's also mentioned Mexico and to a greater extent Canada. The Mexico one has probably been the least mentioned. And this seems pretty out of left field, which is how Donald Trump's brain operates. But it's also, to me, it seems to be a very confused and befuddled bait and switch that it seems like a very large amount of MAGA, a lot of Trump supporters, seem to be fine with, no matter how incoherent it is with the ideas of America First and everything Trump ran on during the 2024 election. What do I mean by that? Trump's main issues, I think, that helped him win the election were obviously immigration, which was what helped get him elected in 2016, and then we saw under 2020, besides COVID, and inflation, we saw the Biden administration just fell miserably at immigration. This likely helped him win the 2024 election. When Donald Trump is talking about this expansion of, he brings on Elon Musk for government efficiency, and he brings on Ron Paul, and we got these ideas that he's going to be these were maybe optimistic ideas, that he would start taking on more of this Javier Milei approach and actually balancing budgets and shrinking deficits and decreasing the size of the government. None of that happens as you expand the scope of the empire. Let me be clear on that. Furthermore, should we look at the acquisition of Mexico, we have to realize that that is pretty much directly counterintuitive to what Donald Trump ran on. And that was illegal immigrants. Now, he's not opposed to legal migration, but if you were to make Mexico part of the U.S., this would, by default, make every one of those criminals that he talks about, fine, good business owners, nice families, right? He doesn't have a problem with that. But everybody in Mexico is de facto now in U.S. borders and free to move around. This changes the culture. This changes the voting bloc. This changes all the dynamics that Trump was concerned about. Now, the only thing, I guess, as a counter, at least on, maybe I could still man this argument better as I thought on it more, but I guess you end up having a much shorter wall to build down in southern Mexico than across the Texas and New Mexico border. I guess that's a shorter wall, but you're putting in a large population that you were trying to keep out. It's very incongruent with any previous thoughts of the Make America Great Again, America First movement. Likewise, now I don't think he's very serious on that one. I do think he's much more serious on Greenland and the Panama Canal. Now, the canal isn't really a territory that would bring in voters or anything like that. But Greenland makes a little more sense, I guess, towards this because he wants it for resources, natural resources that haven't been utilized up there. And it's got a small population, so it probably wouldn't sway too much. It's a small enough population, you probably want to give it statehood. Now, Denmark has it. I'm not sure they want to give it up. And so I don't know what the cost is. But that one seems the most plausible without overturning the apple cart. However, he's talked several times about making, including a hilarious, what I thought at first was a hilarious joke to Trudeau, about making Canada the 51st state. Now, you have to realize what that comes with. This is a bait and switch on everything he said. Donald Trump wrote on X not long ago that a resulting union between the U.S. and Canada would be a great nation. Now, when we hear that, it's a political slogan. Maybe it pays service to the Canadians listening, but why would it be a great nation and how? You have to ask yourself that. What about it? Because when Donald Trump looks on a map, he goes, look how much bigger I made America. Was little, was a good-sized country. Now it's huge. It's huge. Like, it is just the amount of color on the maps showing the same color as the United States. Is that what would make it great? Now, he probably is also thinking of the resources, but with a little bit of a scrutinizing glance, we can see that this is still 40 million new American citizens, if this is made a state, right? What does that do? When we talk about 40 million new people, this is not an even split on the political divide. Canada is much more to the left. It would be basically saying like, hey, let's have, and there's a great article that I'm going to be taking some of my information from on Mises.org by Ryan McMacken. I encourage you to go check it out. But look, 40 million. I mean, you're just saying, hey, let's put a new California. Let's give the left a new California. And not only that, now they have this freedom of access to different parts of the nation. So all these people in Texas that are getting worried about Californians coming in, and, you know, Texas is red now, but it wasn't long ago everyone was saying it was purple, and they were worried, oh, Californians are going to come in and turn our state blue. Well, now you have a whole nother one with blistering winters and, just like Canada, very high costs. Now you're going to have them being free to move to warm places like Texas or Florida or South Carolina or wherever have you. This could sway states very easily. And even if it doesn't, the state of Canada would be blue. And if you make it into multiple states, the ones with the most people that are going to get the most representatives in the House, Quebec and Ontario is basically where all the Canadians live. They're very blue. And when I say blue, I'm talking in the American sense. They're going to be very far to the left. As McMacken says in his article, a right-wing Canadians, basically a Democrat here in America, McMacken on his article brings up a couple of facts or statistics. A recent poll of Canadians showed that 70% of Canadians support banning all new handgun purchases. Okay, what part of America First is that, or making America great again? That is, I mean, it's in direct contrast to what our Constitution said. 80% support bans of assault weapons, variously defined. So, I mean, obviously, when you get these polls, they don't know what to call an assault weapon because there's no strict definition on what one is. But 80% support bans on assault weapons. That's 40 million people. Well, it's not. What's 80% of 40 million? You do the math. I mean, we're talking, what is that, 35 million that are now on the ban assault weapons? You're just giving the left. Numbers are typically 10 to 20% higher than the numbers found in the United States. Similarly, 80% of Canadians polled typically support abortion on demand. In the United States, it's 60%. In the United States, 43% of Americans say the healthcare system should be run by the government. In Canada, 86%. So it's twice as much for socialized medicine. And the free speech in Canada is just terrible by any counts. So when you're talking about all these America First, Make America Great Again ideals or policies, beliefs, principles, whatever, bringing in 40 million Canadians is basically a great way to attack it. I can't imagine the Democrats being anything but thrilled if they could get Canada to join the U.S. Now, if you bring in Mexico, maybe some of these things, I mean, I don't know about freedom of speech. Maybe the gun ideals are better, and probably abortion is better than Canada. But now you're bringing in a state with terrible infrastructure, terrible crime, terrible corruption. The cartels are now inside the United States of America. The problems from either of those are huge. But Trump thinks in such a simple frame, and he's distracted so easy by stuff that's shiny. And when he sits there and he thinks he can color in on the map Canada and Greenland and the Panama Canal, he'd go, oh, that, I mean, you know, that's his legacy. And all of a sudden, we can't even talk about freeing Ross Ulbricht. We can't talk about what is the DOJ going to do, the Department of Government Efficiency. What's going to happen here? All of these things that were pushed aside. No one's talking about the wall. Now he's talking about incorporating the entire nation of Mexico or the entire border of Canada becoming porous with Canadians, which, like I said, maybe that's not as a problem in so much as the crime, but it's definitely a problem culturally, politically, for the American First crowd. So when I see this move, I can only attribute it to either Trump just loving the idea of an acquisition that makes the country a bunch of money, which shows how good of a businessman he is, or the fact that he just expands the territories so much that in his legacy, it's look how much the United States got. I mean, honestly, Canada's bigger than the United States. He over doubled the size of the United States in one term. Like, those are his legacies. It has very little to do with anything that I can see as coherently America First or making America great again. It seems short-sighted, even for Donald Trump. And I know he likes the idea of the money, but this expansion of government and this expansion of empire coming from the time he's elected to not even before he becomes inaugurated, it just shows you, really, it shows you that I think I was right not to vote for him, even though I was rooting for him, and I'm still happy he won comparatively. But, you know, salesman or this businessman salesman thing of Donald Trump isn't that much more honest than a lot of politicians. He fits in pretty easily. And as unrelated as they are, when I hear him talking about this with these big headlining newses, it really makes me less confident in him freeing Ross Ulbricht, because it's like, who has time to do that? I'm talking about buying British Columbia and Ontario and Quebec and Greenland. Like, so how does this work? Once, let's say these wheels are set into motion, are all the Trumpers, are all the Make America Great Again, the MAGAs, are they just going to just follow the cult of personality and say, yep, we're with him right away? Are they going to say, hey, leader, you're losing sight of everything we thought you were going to deliver and everything you promised to deliver, and instead you've just swerved off the trail looking for greener pastures? This is going to be a big question for this new idea of the conservative party and the right or whatever, which all of a sudden had these different demographics going for it, which has never had before. And it had this big rebranding. And before the president's inaugurated, he's throwing an entire new game plan into the mix. I mean, imagine you're a football coach that's just like, hey, I'm going to run the ball 3 yards in a pile of dust, single wing, just I formation, big heavy tackles and fullbacks, and that's what we are. We're going to do that, and we're just going to play solid football. And then 2 weeks before opening day, They're like, by the way, we're an air raid offense. Now, that's not what any of your team bought into or the fans bought into, and they would be right to be confused and say, hey, this isn't what we wanted. And this is much more significant than anything in football, but that was just my analogy to try to make it maybe clear or provide a different perspective. But I just don't understand, and I would love to hear what you think. What is his perspective on this besides either resources to extract or a legacy to be had? What other benefits are there? And if those if there are other benefits, name them, and do they counter the negatives that will inevitably happen because of these actions? Now, it's likely none of this stuff will come to fruition, or very, very unlikely that all of those things would come to fruition. But if you're talking about it, I'm going to talk about it. So let me know. Is it possible that the pros outweigh the cons of something like this? And regardless, how is it America First? That's what I want to know from you, and that's what I want to know from Donald Trump and his group of people. So, thank you for listening, and God bless. We'll catch you on the next one.